In 1997, scientists listening to the deep ocean heard something they were not expecting, a sound. So powerful it crossed thousands of kilometers of open water. So low in frequency, it did not sound like anything alive, or anything mechanical. They called it the bloop, not because they understood it, but because they needed a name for something that did not fit. Tonight, we are not diving into the ocean. We're listening to what it refused to explain. In the late 1990s, scientists were listening. Not searching, not expecting discovery, just listening. Across the world's oceans, networks of underwater microphones quietly recorded the movement of water, ice, and earth. Most of what they heard was familiar, predictable, routine. The slow language of a planet in motion. And then, one sound did not belong. It arrived without warning. A low-frequency signal that rose out of the deep ocean and traveled farther than anyone expected it to. A sound so powerful, it crossed thousands of kilometers of open water. A sound so slow, so deep, that it did not resemble anything mechanical or biological or geological that scientists were accustomed to hearing. It was not loud in the way explosions are loud. It was vast. The year was 1997. The place was nowhere specific and everywhere at once, because this sound did not come from a point easily reached or observed. It emerged from the deep southern ocean, a region so remote that even today it remains largely unexplored, a place where light does not reach, where pressure reshapes matter, where silence feels heavier than sound. The listening stations recorded it, and then they recorded nothing else like it again. At first, the sound was treated as an anomaly, a curiosity. Scientists encounter strange data all the time. Instruments misbehave, signals overlap, noise finds its way into recordings. Most irregularities are explained quietly and forgotten just as quickly. But this one resisted that process. The signal lasted longer than expected. It carried farther than expected, and it behaved in a way that did not fit existing patterns. When scientists tried to compare it to known sounds, whale calls, seismic activity, ice movement, it did not align, not in frequency, not in duration, not in scale. The more they listened, the less comfortable the comparison became. Eventually, the sound needed a name, not because it was understood, but because it had to be referenced, labeled, filed. Something unclassified but not unrecorded. They called it the bloop, a casual name for something profoundly unsettling. Names are a way of managing uncertainty. We name storms, we name stars, we name illnesses before we understand them. Naming does not explain, it contains. What made the bloop disturbing was not just its volume or its reach, but the implication of scale. The sound was strong enough that, if it had come from a living source, that source would have had to be larger than any known animal ever recorded. Larger than the blue whale. Larger than anything science had evidence for. And yet, it sounded organic. Not metallic, not artificial, alive. Or at least moving in a way that suggested life. That suggestion unsettled people far beyond the scientific community, because the ocean already occupies a strange place in the human imagination. It is present but unreachable, known but uncharted, a surface we cross easily, and a depth we rarely touch. To hear something rise from that depth, something that could not be easily placed, reopened a familiar discomfort. Scientists did what they always do when confronted with uncertainty. They began eliminating possibilities. It was not a ship. The sound did not match engines or propellers. It lacked the regularity and mechanical structure of human machinery. There were no shipping lanes nearby that could account for it. No recorded activity that coincided with the moment it was detected. It was not an explosion. Explosions have sharp signatures, sudden beginnings, rapid decays. This sound unfolded slowly, like something stretching rather than striking. It was not a known marine animal. Whale calls were examined closely. The largest whales produce powerful sounds, but none matched the frequency range or the sheer reach of the bloop. No migration patterns aligned. No known species behaved this way. As each familiar explanation was set aside, the shape of the mystery changed, not sharper, heavier. Theories emerged as they always do. Some suggested massive ice events, enormous icebergs cracking or scraping along the ocean floor. Ice can create strange, low-frequency sounds when it fractures under pressure. And in polar regions, these sounds can travel far. This explanation made sense. Almost. But the acoustic profile did not fully align. The shape of the signal was different, the rhythm unfamiliar, the energy distribution inconsistent with known ice activity at the time. Others pointed to geological movement, subsea earthquakes, volcanic activity, shifts in tectonic plates. The ocean floor is alive with motion, even when the surface appears calm. But again, the signal refused to sit comfortably within those categories. It lacked the sharpness of seismic noise. It behaved more like something moving through water than something breaking beneath it. As explanations accumulated, something strange happened. None of them erased the unease. Each theory reduced uncertainty slightly, but never fully. Each explanation fit part of the sound, but never all of it. And when an explanation does not close a story, the story continues to live. Over time, scientific attention shifted. New projects emerged. New signals demanded focus. Data continued to be collected, sorted, archived. The bloop remained, but quietly. No repetition was ever detected. No second event confirmed its nature. No follow-up signal arrived to clarify what the first one had been. The ocean returned to its baseline noise. And yet, the sound did not disappear. It stayed in recordings, in reports, in memory. Because there is something deeply unsettling about hearing something once and never again. Human perception is shaped by repetition. We trust what we can observe repeatedly. We feel safe when patterns emerge, when events can be recreated, studied, predicted. The bloop offered none of that. It appeared once, then withdrew. This is why it lingered. Not because it was loud, but because it was brief. The ocean is filled with sound. Whales communicate across vast distances. Ice groans and cracks. Water masses collide and separate. Even silence underwater is never truly silent. But most of these sounds are expected. They belong. The bloop did not. In the years that followed, technology improved. Listening equipment became more sensitive, more precise. Better at filtering noise, better at distinguishing sources. The ocean was monitored more closely than ever before, and yet, nothing like the bloop was heard again. Progress does not always eliminate mystery. Sometimes it only confirms absence. There is a temptation to believe that every mystery is temporary. That given enough time, enough data, enough instruments, uncertainty will dissolve. But some events resist that arc, not because they are supernatural, but because they occur at the edge of observation. The deep ocean is one of those edges. It covers most of the planet, it shapes climate, it absorbs sound, and it remains largely unseen. We know more about the surface of the moon than we do about much of the ocean floor. Light cannot reach most of it. Pressure destroys conventional machines. Distance erases signal clarity. What we hear from the deep is always incomplete. Fragments, echoes. The bloop was an echo without a visible source. A reminder that listening does not always lead to understanding. Over time, public interest waxed and waned. Speculation grew in places where certainty was absent. Imaginations filled the gaps that data could not. Stories emerged, not because they were likely, but because silence invites them. But even stripped of speculation, even reduced to its most conservative interpretation, the event remains unsettling. Something produced that sound. Something moved enough water to be heard across an ocean. And then it stopped. Perhaps it was ice. Perhaps it was geology. Perhaps it was something ordinary that simply occurred in an extraordinary way. But the absence of repetition leaves space, and space is where unease lives. The bloop did not change science. It did not rewrite textbooks. It did not trigger expeditions. What it did instead was quieter. It reminded listeners that the ocean does not reveal itself on demand, that monitoring is not mastery, that some signals arrive without explanation and leave without resolution. Listening continued. The instruments kept recording, the data kept accumulating, but the moment passed, and that moment became the story. We often imagine discovery as a dramatic unveiling, a breakthrough, a revelation. But sometimes discovery is simply an interruption, a brief deviation from expectation, a sound that does not fit. The bloop exists in that space, not as proof of anything, but as a reminder that the world is larger than our frameworks, that explanation is not the same as closure, that absence can be louder than presence. The ocean remains, listening stations remain, the sound remains, archived, referenced, remembered, not because it defied explanation completely, but because explanation did not quiet it. Some mysteries persist not because they are unsolved, but because they were encountered briefly and never returned. This has been Night Archive. Thank you for listening.